There are many different ways people talk about mindfulness, but I would say it's a shift in awareness. And meditation is one of the places where you can really practice that shift. And the shift is towards experiences in the present moment. And we also practice a shift in attitude. So you meeting the present moment with more intention. The first question really with this study was, can people with ADHD do mindfulness? Okay. Is this something that is a setup for failure, or is this something that is doable and actually helpful?
Is this cruel to suggest to ADHDers?
Exactly. There's always more right with you than wrong with you. I love that saying. This is from John Kabat-Zinn. There's always more right with you than wrong with you. It is what it is. And what you said a moment ago, it's a big one for radical acceptance.
So, welcome to the Attention Different podcast. My name is Stephen Tonti. I'm a twice degree holding professional storyteller, or story mom. And hosting with me today is my co-founder and bestie for life,
Aaron Smith, and I'm a licensed clinical therapist and also have a practice called Potential Within Reach.
Woo! So today we are kicking off with a very special guest. If you are like a lot of ADHDers who try meditation, you probably stopped a few minutes in and thought, this is definitely not for me. My brain will not stop. I see you. I feel you. But you might be operating on a myth about what mindfulness actually is. Our guest today is Dr. Lidia Zylowska. Am I saying that right, Lidia?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Pretty good? Okay, we're going to get it. Yeah.
I say there's love in it, so it's Zylowska.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So our guest today is Dr. Lidia Zylowska, the psychiatrist and researcher who pioneered scientific studies of mindfulness for ADHD. She's here to show us why the restless, overactive, distractible ADHD brain isn't a barrier to meditate around. It's actually the perfect starting place. We're going to talk about how to bring mindfulness into real daily life without a meditation cushion, why your inner voice might be your biggest obstacle, and what it looks and feels like to coach yourself through an ADHD challenge with compassion instead of criticism. Whether you've been diagnosed for years or you're still figuring out what ADHD even means, this conversation will change how you think about being present and finding peace of mind. So without further ado, Dr. Lidia Zylowska, thank you so much for being on the Attention Different podcast. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great introduction. I'm like, this is a great capsule of what mindfulness is. That it's just something that you can bring in to any moment and work on with it in different ways. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
We're happy to have you on, and you are definitely one of the pioneers in this space. Before mindfulness became more of a fad, and it's something that people are doing and talking about, and there's many apps and things that are out there nowadays. But I want to just start with, what is mindfulness? Can you give us kind of like the on the street definition of how people should understand mindfulness, and maybe how that also differentiates between, mindfulness and meditation? Like how do you differentiate those?
Yeah. So, there are many different ways people talk about mindfulness, but I would say it's a shift in awareness. And meditation is one of the places where you can really practice that shift. And the shift is towards experiences in the present moment, which so it's an attentional shift. That's part of mindfulness. And we also practice a shift in attitude. So you meeting the present moment with more intention, and you're also meeting the present moment with an attitude of openness, curiosity. Sometimes people say being non-judgmental, or even more than that, with compassion. And that last piece is really important if you are shifting awareness inward and you're noticing something that's happening in the present moment inside your mind, your emotions, your thoughts, maybe even your body. And that's important with ADHD, with that restlessness.
Mm-hmm. Having self-compassion for yourself.
Yes. Or as you're observing something, really practicing that openness, non-judgment, and compassion a good way, I think sometimes, so not having too many words, is curiosity. Because when you're curious, you kind of, and ADHD people are so great at curiosity. It immediately gives you the sense like, hey, I can do this. I can be curious. It's not like I have to meditate. I have to do certain things. I have to sit still, right? I can be curious about my present moment experience. And often with curiosity comes this sort of suspension of expecting how things should be and
that
maybe
judgment.
judging and that judgment of things, right? So it really kind of helps you see things with new eyes, like beginner eyes in a way, right? Beginner's mind.
Yeah, that's something that the Buddhists like to say a lot, right? That beginner's mind, bringing the beginner's mind, not approach it with some playfulness, not having so much seriousness and judgment. And the more expectations we put on ourselves and the more things we build up about what this is or what I should be, how I should be engaging in mindfulness or meditation or whatever the practice is, that gets in the way, right? So if we approach it as if, let's just be curious, let's be playful, you come to it with a whole different attitude.
Yeah, I think it's such a key to be playful. And sometimes, it's when I talk to people about mindfulness and emphasize those two pieces, the attention piece and the attitude piece, sometimes we break it down and say, how about, you just practice shifting your attitude throughout the day. So maybe not putting so much pressure on, I have to be present, I have to really, bring my attention back all the time. And if I space out, that's a bad thing. It's like, how about just practicing being kinder to yourself and using that as a doorway to starting to practice mindfulness. Sometimes you could and sometimes you can emphasize more the attention piece, like, hey, notice where your attention goes. And then when you notice that you're distracted, bring yourself back. And then big part of that is also attitude. It's like, without judging yourself, without beating yourself up, without shaming yourself, like, oh, here's where my attention went, and now I'm bringing it back. And I can just practice that.
Yeah, that's that thing that people don't get with mindfulness and meditation is when our mind goes off into different thoughts. And for the ADHD brain, our minds are constantly kind of getting off on different trains of thought, or we're noticing sensations and things in our environment, whether that's with our eyes or our ears or whatever the sensory perception, organs are using. We are constantly kind of getting pulled away, but that's not a bad thing. It's actually a way to practice. It's like you said, bringing your attention back. What it does is it strengthens kind of a mental muscle. It's similar to lifting weights in a gym, right? If you're training a muscle group and you want to strengthen that, just thinking about it isn't really going to do it. Just like imagining it, right? I want to get stronger. If you just imagine it, it's not going to happen. You have to actually do it. You have to practice it. So when we get distracted, when our mind goes off, it's like the more we pull it back, that's a rep. That's like a mental rep for your brain.
Yeah, totally. And you could say that if you have ADHD, you have more opportunities for these reps.
Yeah.
You have more opportunities to bring attention back. So
it's a good reframe. Yeah.
Yeah. You can really, see the moment you catch yourself being distracted as a success, right? It's not like I'm failing at this. It's like, oh, I caught myself. Now I can do this rep. I can bring myself back.
Yeah, it's more practice. I like that.
Hey, Stephen here. Sorry to interrupt. We just wanted to take a brief moment to tell you about this week's sponsor. At Attention Different, our mission is simple. Offer ADHD adults proven practical strategies for living a more balanced, fulfilled ADHD life. And that is why we are thrilled to offer our latest course, Thriving with Adult ADHD. While other courses might focus on the pain and struggle of being an adult with ADHD, and we do not want to minimize that, this course is designed around accessible, relevant, and applicable techniques that address the most common challenges facing ADHD adults. Inside Thriving with Adult ADHD, You will learn how to better understand your adult ADHD and gain clarity about how your brain works. You'll learn to find balance by optimizing medication, self-care, and professional support. You will learn how to gain confidence and take control of your life through tailored, actionable solutions. Thriving with Adult ADHD features 2 hours of on-demand video, 10 downloadable resources, lifetime access to the material, and a satisfaction guarantee. Go to attentiondifferent.com/thriving to sign up now. That's attentiondifferent.com/thriving to sign up now. Hey, thanks for the quick break. Now back to the interview.
So how did you, let me just ask you this. How did you get started in this field? And when did you get started? When did you actually start working in the space of mindfulness, and how did that go initially?
Yeah, I got into mindfulness when I was in my psychiatry training at UCLA in the early 2000s. So I was still in my training and got really interested in integrative medicine. So more like holistic medicine, mind-body medicine. And from that interest, I came across mindfulness, Jon Kabat-Zinn's work with mindfulness-based stress reduction program, or MBSR. I actually had opportunity to leave my residency program for a year and just immerse myself in this fellowship called East-West Medicine Fellowship. So it was like a year to really, play and try different integrative medicine approaches, and I was able to go do MBSR training. At that time, I did some mind-body skills training with James Gordon, who's another psychiatrist. I also learned about mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which was just coming on the field. This was work by 3 psychologists who, Zindel Segal, Mark Williams, and I think it's John Teasdale. So there were 2 British and 1 Canadian psychologists in the cognitive behavior therapy world that wanted to find an approach to help people who've been depressed and were at risk for depression, and how to help them not get spiraled down into depression again. And so they actually ended up connecting with Jon Kabat-Zinn, looking at MBSR, and based on that developed MBCT, which is the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. And they brought kind of by writing about the MBCT approach, and they just put out this manual for how to teach MBCT. So I was just like, oh, this is so cool. You have mindfulness, you have this language of mindfulness, but they also brought the language of cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive science, and reframed some of that language that made that brought it closer to my, to what I was learning as a psychiatrist, and also brought some new ideas, like this idea of automatic pilot, right? So they put it in the context of depression, that people with history of depression, it's very easy to have a trigger, maybe some sadness, get you into a little bit of a sad mood, and then that starts bringing up old negative patterns of thinking, some depressive thinking, and then you go down the spiral, right? But if you can catch yourself a little earlier in that automatic spiral, then you have a chance to do something differently, and maybe, reshift your focus, remember, what activities can help you feel better in terms of mood, or what thoughts can be more helpful. So that's how they used their approach. They applied it to depression. And at that time, there was a lot of interest within psychology and psychotherapy world to start applying mindfulness to specific conditions. So they did it first with depression, but people were also, adapting now MBSR and MBCT to things like eating disorders and chronic pain. I know is a big one too, right? Right. So MBSR was actually very much for stress and pain. Yeah. And for a while that lived more in the general medicine world. Yeah, but then the hospitals or medicine world. Yeah. Yeah, but with MBCT, which was specific for depression, it really came into the mental health world. And people started doing these adaptations for different conditions. And at the time, I was finishing up as I did the trainings, I was in the last year of my training. I was entering a fellowship, a research fellowship, which was a Robert Wood Johnson fellowship that comes with some money to do research of your choice, which is actually a big luxury, right? Because as a kind of junior person, you usually end up doing research of your mentors. But this was a little different. I had a pot of money to like do some pilot work in the area that I was interested in. And as I was being interested in mindfulness, I was also independently becoming interested in adult ADHD. And that came a little separate. My first introduction to adult ADHD, and I'm trained as an adult psychiatrist. So in those days, most adult psychiatrists had very little training in ADHD.
Zero, almost.
Like zero, right.
For our listeners, what are those days to get kind of a timeline in their head? Like where are we decades-wise?
So we're looking at 2003. That's when I was graduating from my residency.
Very recent. And also my experience growing up in Dallas, Texas, having a pediatrician tell me that I was going to age out of my ADHD through puberty.
See, that was the kind of common knowledge. Like, this is a thing for kids, right? Then kids grow out of ADHD. It doesn't really exist for adults. So, I mean, we have come a long way in the last 25 years, right?
Right.
But, at the time, it was still quite new. And I happened to work in a clinic with it was a women's mental health clinic. And I happened to have two moms come one after the other who were women with ADHD. So unusual at that time, right? But these two women somehow knew they had ADHD and they were really falling apart after having a child. This clinic was specific for women who were just pregnant or becoming pregnant or postpartum. So it was very interesting to me that these two women who describe having systems and, ways to deal with it just couldn't access those strategies anymore. It was just too much to try to manage themselves, their newborn, not having time for sleep, not having time to take walks or exercise. And so I really felt incompetent to help them because I didn't really know much about that at the time. So I started reading about women with ADHD. And, reading that was super interesting because I started seeing this in my family. I'm like, oh my God, we have this in our family. I might have it, So it became personal in a way. Like it moved from professional to personal. And so I was very passionate about learning about adult ADHD. And at the time I was going to do research with something else. And then I thought, wait, I want to do research with ADHD. I want to bring mindfulness to ADHD. And so it kind of wasn't on my radar to do mindfulness for ADHD for a long time. It sort of came together. It was serendipity. I also met a geneticist who at UCLA who became my mentor, Sue Smalley, who was doing genetic studies of families. You might have, maybe you had a chance to meet her. She was doing genetic studies of families with ADHD. And it was very convenient in a way to recruit people with ADHD from that study if we wanted to do an intervention for the families. She was interested in doing something for the families. She was also getting interested in mindfulness and really drove a lot of that interest at UCLA. And so it kind of, I felt like the universe put things together for this to happen.
Definitely.
To really think of mindfulness for ADHD.
Was this at the outset, sorry for interjecting, of her of the co-founding of MARC, the Mindfulness Awareness Research Center, or am I jumping ahead a bit?
No. So what happened was because we started the study, so I partner up with Sue Smalley's lab. I brought the fellowship, money that I had through my fellowship. And so we started doing the adaptation of mindfulness to ADHD, which then kind of grew out to say, well, let's start a center for mindfulness. And that's how There were also other people within UCLA interested in mindfulness. We brought Diana Winston to help with this study. There was Alan Wallace, who was another Buddhist teacher that came to give his input on the training. There was another psychiatrist, Richard 𝐋𝐢𝐝𝐢𝐚, who was interested, doing work with OCD and mindfulness.
All of the big names of the field merged and came together. This sounds amazing. What came about from this? What was interesting about your research and the results of this study? That kind of what was some interesting takeaways or results that you started to see from this study?
Yeah, particularly from this center born out of ADHD. Just a moment, Aaron, to do a little hair toss, but it sounds like it was ADHD that this wider center was born out of. And I'm equally curious what we learned about mindfulness as it pertains to ADHD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The first question really with this study was, can people with ADHD do mindfulness? Okay. Is this something that is a setup for failure, or is this something that is doable and actually helpful?
Is this cruel to suggest to ADHD?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the first question clients ask me too. Oftentimes is can I even do this? I have a distractible mind. Does this make sense for me? And some of them assume right away, I can't do this because my mind is like this. My brain is wired this way. But I'm curious what your findings found.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this initial study was we call it a feasibility study. So we were doing, looking at how many people engaged, attendance, were they able to do at home practice. We did some exit interviews with people, how they felt about it. And then we also, there was a translational research component, was to look at some measures of attention, cognition, to see what was changing before and after. It was an interesting study. There was a lot of pushback from my mentors initially, this doesn't make sense, but it was really helpful that they were open-minded, and we, they said, okay, let's see what you find out.
Yeah. Cause at the time, I just want to emphasize that. I mean, right now we might be okay, yeah, that makes sense, but that's because your research in particular has probably moved everything in that direction to show that no, there has some validity to this. Because I think back in that era, it was more well, why would you even try that? That sounds a little
I'm hearing the pressure coming from both sides, from the participants and from the mentors being that group of people? You want to try mindfulness on that group of humans? Yeah.
No, it was really formative conversation I had with one of my mentors at the time. It was this is not going to go. This is just going to be a setup for failure. And I thought no, this makes sense. But it was hard to know at the time to even know how to explain it. I mean, I do feel like our research helped to create language of understanding why you would even do mindfulness for ADHD. What I do a lot now, and that came from this early work, is to say, if you think about ADHD being a self-regulation disorder, right? Difficulty with self-regulation of attention, emotions, choosing actions, right? And we know that from Dr. Barkley's work, that this is not just about attention. It's because you can have distraction, you can have hyperfocus, right? You can have low emotions, you can have excited emotions, you can be very, driven, and you can have trouble getting up and getting going. So it's really about that self-regulation skill that we're, that's where ADHD, creates impairment, and that's where you can actually improve. And mindfulness is a self-regulation skill, right? Mindfulness practice is a self-regulation training. So if you put the two together, then it totally makes sense, right? You're working on the attention level. You're learning how to be with your emotions, how to regulate emotions. You're also learning how to make choices that are maybe different than what this automatic or impulsive choice may be.
Yeah, it's not controlling your thoughts or stopping your thoughts, that kind of thing. Or, I don't know, slowing down your thoughts, or, I mean, I guess sometimes that might be a byproduct or something, but I don't think that's the objective of it, right? It's like, so how we approach it and how we start to think about it, you really like created that language for us to understand, conceptualize it. Because at that time, like, right, this was Barkley still, this was very new, this executive dysfunction conceptualization of ADHD. That was right at the time that was also coming. That was very new research at that time too, right? Like the early 2000s.
He's been at it for a long time. So I think he's been writing about it, maybe even a decade before. But I think it was starting to become more adapted by clinicians, because he was very intent on teaching this new understanding of ADHD, which is so helpful. And now, we talk about self-regulation. We talk about emotion regulation as part of ADHD, which was really not a part of typical conversations with patients. It's still not part of diagnostics. Right. Clinicians in the ADHD space know that you have to ask about these other things. But if you just look at the DSM-5 criteria, this diagnostic book, right, the diagnostic Bible, they're just so limited. And so there is, more effort now to try to rethink it as well.
Well, this is an interesting framework between Barkley and your feasibility study, just to get us back on that track. So, like, how did your feasibility study, which is phase 1, line up with the dissenting mentors of the time, the dissenting patients of the time, or participants, and then also, though, this new research coming out, kind of knocking on the door, being like, actually, there's a need for, right, executive function regulation. So bring us back to that point of, there's a there.
Yeah. So, we just maybe talk a little bit more about the studies itself. So we recruited about, I think it was 25 adults and a smaller group of adolescents. Gosh, it's been so long ago. I think it was just 8 adolescents that we had. So it's a much smaller group, but this was one question, like, at what age should you be doing mindfulness training, right? Like, up to this point, all mindfulness training was done with adults. And we thought, like, this is a developmental disorder. Should we go younger when the brain is still more plastic? And there's a lot of talk about neuroplasticity. But we decided to go more with adults. Couple reasons. I was trained as an adult. That was more comfortable place for me to start. But also I thought, if we can show that it works with adults, then we can start working with younger ages. And that's why we included also the older adolescents. Their ages were 15 to 18. Okay. So not adults, but not super young. And so, what we found is that people actually could engage in the training, were very eager to try mindfulness. This is for the adults. For the teens, since we only recruited a smaller sample, it was a little bit more tricky, right, to recruit at that time. For adults, we had much easier time recruiting. And I think it was in part, there was not as much talk about adult ADHD. So people wanted to be diagnosed. We helped people get diagnosed through the study, and, we're coming in. We also, this question of, like, is this a setup for failure was a big question in my mind. So we wanted to make the training very approachable. And that drove the main adaptations of going from something like MBSR to MBCT, which was our model, to what became MAPS for ADHD, and subsequent, MAPS classes through Mark, kind of benefited from that adaptation. So this was...
And that's, acronym MAP as in mindfulness awareness practice? I'm just guessing.
Mindful awareness practices.
Oh, cool. Yeah, okay.
You could say, so we want, actually, if we want to be stickler, why choose MAPS, right? And I just say mindfulness, because this was to say that there are many different ways to learn mindfulness, mindful awareness practices, right? It's not just meditation. It's also could be other things. You can bring other mind-body approaches like yoga, tai chi. You can also do journaling. You can do therapy. it could be even like some other reflective practices from spiritual background. So it was trying to have a term that could be more encompassing and pointing to the fact that you have different roads to learning mindfulness.
Yeah, I think y'all nailed it.
Yeah. So but we were doing the training in a way similarly to MBCT. MBCT was kind of my big motto, and that was based on MBSR. So this was 8-week training. You meet weekly for 2.5 hours. You also have some at-home practice. And so we use that framework too. So the training is similar, and it's the format in its original form is like that. But how we introduced mindfulness was that instead of starting with half an hour or 45 minutes of practice, which was common in those other programs, we said, let's start with 5 minutes. Okay. So 5 minutes, and the framing of it was really important, is to tell people, if you can't do 5 minutes, let's maybe at home do less than that. Do what you can, right? Do what feels feasible. Start where you are. And so that was one big, I think, change for our program, thinking about what makes sense for ADHD.
So you adapted it for kind of the ADHD brain and neurodiverse folks, and found a way for them to, because it's that barrier of entry, I think, too, that's harder for folks with ADHD. Oftentimes is like that initiation and just getting started with something to build it into a habit. There's that task initiation difficulty. So I think that's kind of what you're getting at, is like, all right, well, if we break it down and make it even smaller and more approachable, then there's less of a barrier to even try.
Exactly. So we did 5 minutes, then midpoint increased to 10, up to 15. So still 15, not a long time, but we try to get people gradually up to that point. There's also, as you know, there's mindfulness meditation, like formal practice where you sit quietly, and what people mostly associate with meditation, right? It's either guided, you're bringing attention to your breath. Maybe it could be a mantra. This is, in other meditation traditions. So you have this formal practice. Within mindfulness, you also have mindful walking, which is a really good option for ADHD as well, because it's active. It's active. And so we were teaching people to do the formal practices and variety of them. But we also emphasized the informal practice, because we thought that's where, for a lot of people, that may be where they stick. It's not just the formal practice, it's the informal practice. And that's where the ADHD happens a lot of times. Yes, the ADHD can happen on the cushion because your mind can be going all over the place. But the ADHD moments, they're happening in daily life.
I want to read out a few of these informal practices. I have your book here for clinicians. So you have a list of all these different ones. I'm not going to list all of them, but I'm just going to go through a few of them, because it might surprise people that they're, clients are surprised sometimes when I talk to them and I'm like, doing the dishes can be a practice of mindfulness, right? It's like how you approach the dishes, how you approach brushing your teeth. So on here you have driving. And I think driving is such a good one. Like if you have a normal, regular drive to somewhere, right? You're dropping your kids off at daycare, you're going to and from work. Like whenever you hit traffic, whenever you see some kind of driver who's doing something that, maybe they didn't use their turn signal, or they're braking, or they're acting a little erratic, that's a perfect time to kind of slow down, be mindful, and just practice taking some breaths, not reacting, just being aware of whatever the things that come up for you. And I'll just name a few others. It's like you say chopping vegetables, preparing coffee, making your bed, folding laundry, gardening. And then you have a few others that are I think more of acronyms kind of, right? You have stop reminders and rain reminders. Do you want to tell people a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. So, those acronyms came from mindfulness meditation tradition. I first learned about STOP in MBSR, and then RAIN. This is work by Tara Brach, who's a Buddhist teacher. And we thought having these acronyms for ADHD is helpful, because sometimes people will if you can have something that helps you remember the practice, right? It's not that the practice is hard, but sometimes having a little cue can be helpful. So these acronyms can be cues, and can also tell you the steps, how to shift your awareness in that moment, so you can engage with your experience a little differently. And so STOP is kind of what it says. It's STOP, but every letter tells you something that you can do in that moment. So it's stop for the letter S. T would be take a breath or a few breaths. And that immediately is a reshift of attention, right? So usually when as we go about our day, we're thinking, planning, we're distracted. We may be caught in our thoughts, narrative. So just saying to take a few breaths, you already are training your attention to drop and reshift. And then the O of stop is to observe in the present moment. And there's lots of things in the present moment you can observe. So in our training, we kind of focus on different things from session to session that you would observe. And examples would be observe your breath a little longer, and maybe count your breath up to 10. It could be whatever number you pick, but that could be, that could be that. Other things that you can observe could be really tuned to your senses. Notice, what's going on around you. Sounds are always there. You can tune into that. You can tune into if you're eating, what you're eating, smells, taste, texture. If you are petting a cat, you can really tune in to hear the sensation of the cat. So you could observe that in the present moment. So whether it's breath, whether it's, through senses, you are disengaging from this busy mind, right? This cloud where often, we have the suffering often lives in that cloud, how we treat ourselves, how we interpret things. The other things you can observe in the present moment is going inward, like what thoughts am I having right now? What feelings do I notice?
So there's the outward, external things you're observing with your senses, and then there's the internal, emotions.
I feel like a gate is passed through between external and internal, if I may be so bold. I feel like that's a leveling up, right? Like a nice entry point is to do something externally and then to shift from that place to internal. Yes.
Yes. I think especially with ADHD, it's much easier to pay attention to external stuff, right? Kind of almost reactively. And it's also easier to get pulled by your busy mind. In a way that you're lost in that cloud. So actually observe your experience from that witnessing perspective that we talk about in mindfulness, and tuning into what's going on with that witnessing perspective is not easy. And so it is leveling up. And so we don't get to that part in our training till session 4 or 5, after the midpoint, right? So the first few sessions are very much about be curious about your attention. Just notice how much it goes elsewhere, right? And learn the foundation of being non-judgmental and kind to yourself about the fact that you get distracted a lot. Then let's play with the attention, and a lot of the initial practices are like the 5 senses, but starting with, and we have these 3 anchors of breath, body, and sound, right? And so these are always present, and it's like a place of refuge in my mind that you can connect with if things get too overwhelming or too stressful in your mind, or like you just need a little break. You can focus on the breath, you can focus on your body, you can even tune to sounds. Then we were, the following kind of progression will be to focus on your body. So we would introduce movement like the mindful walking, even mindful stretching, and being aware of that. And with mindful walking, what we did is start with fast walking and then slow down and notice how your awareness changes when you go from faster walking to, because sometimes to jump right into slower walking, it's hard if you're a person who's already operating like on a little higher gear, right?
And what is in the last one? I'm just wondering, when do you get to that proceed, the acronym?
Yes, I got totally distracted.
I'm just I'm hoping to bring you back. That's okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So the P is proceed, and proceed with more awareness, right? And the idea is that once you have a little bit of that stopping, taking a breath, observing in the present moment, particularly if you already at the level of tuning inside, now you're proceeding with more awareness, and there's a new choice that may have arisen from that. You may be continuing what you're doing, but now you're not as tense or stressed, right? Or maybe as you gave yourself that little break, that stopping, you may say, you know what, I need to do something. I am so thirsty. I have not hydrated. Or, you know what, I need to do something else. Or like, wait a minute, I was going to get to this and do this yet. So there is an opportunity to redirect and reshift, but it's not necessary. It may be that you just lower that level of, overwhelm or whatever, not being fully aware of what you're doing, have a different relationship to what you're doing at stop practice.
When someone is...
If I may, Aaron, real quick to add. Yeah, just briefly, because I was struck way back when you were reading from the book, Aaron, and I've been here very mindfully weightless. So there's another proceed for me, but it's a long throw. My first interaction with mindfulness was at a conservatory drama training when I went to undergrad for theater, and a teacher asked us to sit down, close our eyes, and gave us each one raisin, and we were instructed to put the raisin in our mouth and not swallow it, but like play with it in your mouth for like 5 solid minutes. And 5 minutes for everyone listening is an eternity when you are playing with a raisin in your mouth. And I remember the coaching through it, which was like texture, taste, feel. And then that's actually what they do in MBSR training with Jon Kabat-Zinn. So I think that was like pulled directly from that. Okay, so I think Professor Gray pulled that exactly from this then. Yeah, and he would. This is the acting professor of the sort of panel of professors who was very...
It's a classic practice. I think it's maybe in all mindfulness trainings, actually. It's in ours too.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was... this really stands for Professor Gray, just to be clear. So Matt was probably reading these things and
but it's a very powerful experience. Yeah, tell us about it. Because when I did this too, in my MBSR group, it struck me too, because at first I was like, just a raisin, like what this sounds silly, right? Like that's where my mind was. I like, what, a raisin? Okay, I've had raisins since I was 5 years old. What?
No, similarly, this was a group of freshmen. It's a freshman acting class. I was at school for directing, but all the directors take acting the first 2 years. And so this is one classroom. There are 2 other classrooms simultaneously happening. And Matt gives us the raisin and starts off this activity. Same response here from all these 18-year-olds, right? It's a raisin. Oh my God, this is so, like, in fact, we would all make jokes. Oh, this is so acting, right? Like this is such a theater class thing to do. Not realizing that we were embarking on like an MBCT,
MBSR,
right? Like MBSR like training, right? So we put the raisin in our mouth, we close our eyes. Some of us are seated in the posture. Some of us are, just sitting relaxed. And the experience was, as I clearly y'all can relate to, where it starts as judgmental and overactive mind and critical of the practice. And then curiosity creeps in and sensation starts to come back and presence rushes in. And now, there is a 5-minute timer, which as I mentioned before, is an eternity when you have your eyes closed and you have a raisin in your mouth. But by the time you get to that 2nd, 3rd, and 4th minute, I knew that to a person, the 18-year-old students in that room were having a very, I was tempted to say out of body experience, but frankly, the opposite, a very in body experience where other parts of their body were activating. They were noticing, what we call in the breathwork practice, right? Manas, right? This like internal camera going around and checking in on their knees and their joints and their feet and their hands, like other parts of our body started to activate. Of course,
our tongue has some of the most like receptors of, I think it's like touch or other things. Like we obviously have taste and stuff, but we can feel with our tongue.
The ridges
the ridges of the raisin and like the
and
little
starting to melt and dissolve in
granules of sugar or things that are on it. And and how it changes as it gets warmer. And like you start noticing these very subtle things that we've had raisins all the years of our life. But you've never sat there with it and actually noticed and paid attention to those shifts and changes.
We had to report afterwards our sensations. And like a number of people in the room said that they were unaware of other people's breathing until minute 3 or 4 when they're in their bodies. There was a simultaneous external and internal. They're having their own internal practice. But a number of us were like, I actually like heard breathing from my classmates, and I heard their breaths change, and I heard my breathing change. And then I was going inside and outside of my mouth, essentially, and inside and outside of this experience. All of us very profound. But this is driving to an ultimate point. Years later, I proceeded with this kernel, this grain of truth and experience that I had this morning when we were all taking our 3 breaths before Aaron hit the bell. I still had yogurt, kind of like yogurt flavor and yogurt stuff in my mouth. And while I was breathing, I was actively thinking of that studio of half of my lifetime ago and the raisin in my mouth and being like, oh, this is a mindful moment. I'm like, my tongue is scraping the back of my teeth. I'm feeling the bits of granola and yogurt in my mouth. And how do I feel about it? I feel mostly good about it, but also I kind of want to brush my teeth, like where, and then, back to breath. But that process of mindfulness, that very first shot across the bow for me still exists to this day and is still something I can activate and still something I can access. And the proceed part of that to me also has a long shot version of it, which is the more I believe you practice this, the more I believe you train in this way, train to regulate your body and to give yourself a mindful moment, the more opportunity you have sometimes years down the line to return to that place in an instant. Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I agree that you could say P is practice, and, practice makes it easier for things to arise spontaneously, because the more you practice this intentional, mindful eating, the more when you are actually maybe at a picnic with your friends, you will like say, oh, I can really taste this stuff now, right? And oh, that's mindfulness, and I can do more of that now, because it actually came to my awareness that, and I connected it with mindfulness practice. So the more you do this, the easier these moments kind of present themselves to you and offer opportunity to deepen your presence.
Yeah, it's that Hebbian like learning principle too of neuroplasticity, and like neurons that fire together wire together, right? So the more we're practicing and experiencing in the moment, because a very powerful thing is happening when your brain is focused on the sensation of that raisin, the texture, the taste, and being very aware of that. It's forming new connections in your brain, and that neural pathway can be reaccessed and experienced later on in your life. So I think that's what you're talking about, Stephen, is like now you do the behavioral trigger of let's just take a breath. And all of a sudden your mind goes right back to that memory, that time of, I took the breath that time in acting class. Oh, that's what I experienced. Yes. So we're going back through those neural pathways.
Yeah. I think that raisin technique, I say this with no earth shattering truth. I think that raisin moment fundamentally changed some part of my experience, like fine dining, like eating in restaurants. I learned I learned sort of postures and performances from some of my favorite cooking and food channel shows, right? But that doing that with that raisin, and then other versions of that, like fasting for many hours on a breathwork retreat and having a single slice of watermelon, to end the fast, and that being like the best piece of watermelon I've ever had. Right. I've done versions of this, but every one of those stacks up to having a pretty outsized effect on the way that I eat it, like, a very well prepared meal or a specially prepared meal by a loved one. That I'm certain that those experiences have been elevated because of practices like that.
Yeah, we can savor any moment and just bringing the attention to anything, and that's what your whole list, all of these everyday tasks that we were talking about, right? Driving, dishes, laundry. And really, let's be honest, ADHDers, I have a lot of clients that come into my practice and they tell me like, oh, I can't stand to do the dishes, or I hate laundry, or I never make my bed, or stuff like that. And this is a perfect opportunity, I think, to do what you said initially, Lidia, which was like, use that as a place of practice, shift your attitude towards those very same everyday activities. And there you go. You don't have to sit in a lotus posture and meditate and set a timer for 15 minutes or whatever. You don't have to do that, right? You can weave this into your day-to-day routine and actually just say, okay, I have this pile of laundry. How am I approaching this? Am I going to approach this as a mindful task, an opportunity to practice, bringing my attention and being present with the folding of each piece of the clothing and the dishes? Oh, do I notice the warmth on my hands and the suds and how they tingle on my fingers? And we're noticing that. Oh, I'm scrubbing the dish, right? Like we're noticing, we're bringing the attention to it. And I kid you not, like I'll tell clients to practice this, just do this a little bit, test this out, right? At first they think I'm kind of a little bit nuts. They're like, what are you talking about? I do not like this activity. What in the heck are you talking about? I'm like, well, just try it. Just give it a go. And then they come back and they're like, I was surprised. I actually liked the dishes for the first time ever. I was like, yeah, because your brain wasn't constantly pulling you away and wasn't resisting and saying, oh, I hate the dishes. I don't want to do this. This sucks. Why do I have to do this? This is never ending. Instead, it was like, you're choosing, you're approaching, you're proceeding to do that task with a different attitude. And all of a sudden, you may end up even enjoying it.
That sounds like self-coaching to me.
Yeah, good segue.
Thank you. Yeah, it does. It moves from the coach, Aaron, into a moment of self-coaching. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a really great point of, two things come up for me. One is all these things that we have in our daily life, especially the things we do a lot, are great opportunities for practice. For one, because you can anchor mindfulness to it and say, like, every time I do my dishes, I do mindfulness. And now it's not like this extra thing on your to-do list. It's like, I'm just shifting how I'm doing my dishes. I don't have to carve out another 5, 10, 15 minutes for something that stresses me out if I'm not regular. Also, these repeated activities are often just, it's what our brains do. This is how learning works. Right. Once you do something many times, you slip into automatic pilot so much. You get caught in your thinking. You're in your mind as you're doing it. And oftentimes the mind will tell you, oh, this, I don't want to do this. This is taking too long. I really hate this. I wanted to do something else. And so it becomes an unpleasant and kind of aversive experience, and you're more likely to avoid it. But if you approach it with mindfulness, with curiosity, with this non-judgment, it can shift your experience of it, like your relationship of how the activity goes, whether it's eating a raisin or washing dishes, often surprises you, right? You get to feel like, oh, this is not so bad. Oh, I'm noticing new things. Oh, it's actually kind of relaxing if I slow down and connect with my senses in the midst of this. And oftentimes if it's something fairly neutral, it just happens. But there are these things that, people with ADHD know this very much. There are some tasks that you just avoid with all your might, right? Oh, yeah. There are just things you procrastinate on, and they might not even be big things, because once you get into it, you are like, oh, this wasn't so bad. Or if I could do a little bit of that. But there are things that just, whether it's like paperwork, whether it's bills, whether it's a phone call to someone, whether it's like answering email, whether it's, I don't know, brushing your teeth.
Yeah, friend of the pod, Brendan Mahan was on and calls it the wall of awful, right? The wall of
awful, right? So actually, you can bring mindfulness to those moments. And be curious, like, what comes up for me when I feel this wall of awful? What thoughts are happening? Like, what do I feel in my body? Like, what feeling is it frustration? Is it fear? Is it like, just like, I'm so exhausted just even thinking about it? So you can actually start unpacking what this avoidance is about. What is this procrastination about? And I think that's a big piece of actually overcoming it and learning to self-regulate through those difficult moments. And so, with coaching, you mentioned coaching, we learn those strategies from others and we internalize them. But we can also, develop our own inner voice to be more attuned with mindfulness, more kind, more informed by ADHD, because the more you know what are the typical challenges of ADHD, the more skillful you are also about some strategies to overcome. So we, in our training, we talk about mindful self-coaching, which is very much about tuning to that inner voice that comes up automatically, and then shifting to a voice that can actually either tell you to relate a little differently to the experience, or actually could activate that mindful pause and say, like, all right, tune in. You're having a difficult moment. Let's just be curious. And I do that practice a lot myself. It's like, okay, what's in my body right now? What am I thinking? What am I feeling?
So the more you say that, like, the more your internal voice switches from the judgmental and condemning, harsh self-critic,
right,
to the voice of curiosity and observation and paying attention, that almost becomes more of the automatic response that happens the more you do it.
Yeah. And then the next step, which is a big part of mindfulness, we haven't quite yet gotten to it, is that compassion piece, the self-compassion and how you relating to yourself. And you can actively also recruit your inner voice to say, hey, this is hard for you. No wonder you've been avoiding it, or like, this is hard for anybody with ADHD. Don't beat yourself up over it. And that moment of validation, the moment of, connecting with some kindness is huge. I think it can really shift, like, massively. Like, you may even start noticing, like, oh, well, I just feel a little drop inside. Or maybe, my jaw relaxed a little bit, or my shoulder dropped a little bit, because and you can bring curiosity to that. Like, how is it what happens for me moment by moment if I offer myself some kindness, as opposed to either saying you should do this or being impatient with yourself. Like, how come you haven't done it yet? If you are, in some way judging yourself, or even being stuck in that avoidance, but there's maybe a background noise of like, you're lazy, you're not doing this.
Because I think those voices are actually also external most of the time. We've heard those from teachers and parents and other people in our lives. And most of the time, people aren't born with having a judgmental voice. I don't think of like, why haven't you done that? Why aren't you being productive? What's wrong with you? Why haven't you started this yet? I should have done that already. Or you're lazy. You're stupid. You're a failure. A lot of that stuff, we've heard it. We've heard it from certain people in our lives. And you can maybe even think back and identify specifically whose voice you might be hearing in your head when you say those things. Is that mom? Is that dad? Is that your 8th grade football coach? Is that mean 3rd grade teacher who said, start reading. What's wrong with you? Pick up the book.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can identify that. Other times we don't remember exactly where that came from, but it has become, as an adult, it becomes our voice. We almost relate to and identify it as if it's the source of truth. Like, when I hear that voice, I'm like, well, it must be telling me something really important, because that's why it's saying that thing. And evolutionarily, we hone in on the stuff that's a threat, right? In our environment, we're hardwired to kind of do that. So that's why I think we end up paying more attention sometimes to that negative, critical voice. But how do you, obviously you said just like by practicing and continuing to do this, that's how you begin to change that voice.
Well, yeah, you said compassion.
Is there anything else? Oh, yeah, you said compassion too. Yeah.
Yeah, go on, Aaron.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. I think you're about to say what I'm thinking too.
Well, yeah, no, I have to. I'm giving a nod. How often am I doing this? I'm giving a nod to Mama Tonti, my mom. But she did something profound with the kids when we were younger. And note that she doesn't have a license to perform therapy of any kind, or was she trained in CBT? But she did something that just feels out of this world intuitive. She told me and my siblings, you know that voice that's in your head that talks to you? And we're like, yeah. And for me, ADHD or the group, I was like, definitely. And she said, learn to love that voice, be kind to it, laugh with it, learn to have love for that voice. Because she didn't realize what she was saying, but she was essentially saying, be curious, be compassionate towards that internal monologue rather than being immediately receptive, as Aaron's pointing out, right? Rather than accepting it at face value and she'd be like, oh my God, I am such a fuck up. She would also frame it for us. Like if that voice is saying like, why'd you do that? She said, I love you. Hi. You know what I mean? Oh, hi, voice. Hey. Yeah. Well, I thought I was going to try and do this and that. And I've told her years later that at 12 or 11 or 13, when she told me this, that has stuck with me until 35. And I wanted to use this as a little bit of a bridge because I heard you say having compassion, curiosity. And I remember, and sort of a nod to our listeners, by the way, if you're a person of authority in someone's life, you can help them practice mindfulness by a similar lesson. Am I onto something? Was my mom onto something there?
Totally. And, I think it may be helpful to, at least, for me, it's been helpful to think about how this inner voice develops in the first place. And Aaron, you alluded to that.
Yeah.
But if you go even earlier, we know that the self voice is part of we call it sometimes inner speech. It's a way to help you control and direct your behavior. So if little kids are doing something, they're narrating it out loud.
Right.
Do this, put it here, and of course they'll be influenced by what they're hearing around them. Right. And, they might start using the same words. So if they're in an environment when the adults are saying things like, you should do this and maybe a harsh tone to it, or some criticism
they start telling their doll, put your clothes on, make your bed, like those kind of things that they're hearing mom say.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, and as we grow, we internalize that becomes, we call it private speech or inner speech, or this, the self-talk is a common way to describe it. And there's a lot of, again, you're influenced by what you grew up with, but there's also a natural, I think, tendency to use that voice to self-motivate, to problem solve, to kind of tell yourself what to do. And sometimes we get hung up on okay, do this. Come on, go, you should be doing it this, like that. And we absorb information and we focus on telling ourselves what is the right way, what's the correct way of doing things. And that can start being critical. It can start bringing pressure. So the mindful inner voice is actually saying let's not do that as much. It's let's just create some space to connect with your own experience first. Offer some compassion if there's a moment of struggle. And then from that, we can figure out what's the best next step. So that the next step of mindfulness, compassion is what's the wise choice here? And if parents, and I'm a parent too, and so I say it very gently, but if parents practice that mindful coaching to their kids, and parents often don't do it because they didn't grow up with it. I don't do it reflexively either with my kid all the time, but I try to say, okay, what are you feeling right now? Let's tune into your experience and then try to help them validate that feeling, give some kindness. And then, so what could we do next? Right. So it's really mindful self-coaching, or that inner voice works the best when you think about I'm reparenting myself. I am attuning to myself in this ideal way that even with the best meaning parents, the best environment doesn't always happen, right? And it's not often not intuitive to us as human beings, because we often are, focused on problem solving and using criticism to motivate and things like that. So this is radically different. This is a rebellious part of I think ADHD that can be harnessed to say, I want to do something different. I'm going to try to develop this way of being with myself that's, curious, compassionate, gives me a pause to think of what I really need, what works with my brain, what helps me, who I need to recruit to help me. Instead of maybe that voice that says, you should do more, you're not measuring up, your feeling is off, you shouldn't be feeling this, right?
Yeah.
Or your reaction is too much, you're too sensitive, or, you're not doing this right. And I think some of those voices are part because we live in a neurotypical world. And if you have a neurodivergent brain, you are often getting this feedback. What I want to do is not what other people are doing or how I would approach it or what my needs are. It's not what the rest of the class or a lot of other kids want or struggle with. So you can start even from that, observing that experience, start feeling like something is off with my reaction, right? And so you can start criticizing your own reaction. So it's really important to kind of, I think, give yourself grace for that and work on reshifting that inner voice.
I think this is a perfect segue, actually, to our last question. This question is going to sound familiar to our listeners, but also I think some of your readers and followers. It's all about radical acceptance. You use the word radical, and I feel like we should have a little sound effect, Aaron, for when someone says radical, like a pew, pew, pew. So you talk a lot about self-acceptance as being at the very heart of mindfulness training. I want to connect that to something we ask every guest. What does the idea of radical acceptance mean to you personally? Do you see a difference between someone saying, I have ADHD versus I am ADHD, or fill in the blank emotions there and sort of like states of being, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I saw this question before this interview because you ask your guests to reflect on that. And so I've been thinking about that question. And I think it's a tricky question for me as a mental health professional because I think once you say I am something, you want to make sure you understand what the person's association is with the word ADHD. Because for some people, saying I am ADHD is an act of radical self-acceptance. And it may feel like this is how I'm wired. This is, I'm a neurodiverse individual and I really feel good about that. And I really want to advocate for myself, and really embracing that part of myself is critical. And it's so healing. For other people, they may associate ADHD with, this has been so hard. I can't achieve what I want to do in life. It can really feel heavy. It can feel like it's this thing they didn't understand for so long. They were, fighting against, and it still may be something that gets and trips them every day in their lives, even after they've gotten treatment. So for them, it may be helpful to say, it's just part of me. And there's so much more to me than ADHD. And I can learn how to manage this part, but it doesn't define me. So I think I like to think of like radical acceptance, and it would be great if everyone could say, I have neurodiverse brain and I'm proud of it, right?
Yeah, maybe that's a better way to frame it, is like, I am my brain. I have this neurodiverse brain. It's not separate from me. This is you. Like, your brain is you.
This is who I am. Yeah. And this is, I want to really learn about how I am and what works for me. Right. And celebrate parts that are great, work with the parts that are not so great. It's just that's the radical acceptance piece to me.
I think ADHD is contextual. So it's like, in certain contexts, that's where we start to feel like, okay, this has been a setback, or it's been difficult. It's been a struggle. It's been really hard. But I think sometimes we downplay and don't even pay attention to, we're not mindful of where it has served us and where we do have strengths and capacities. Even the people that are the lowest and feel the worst, folks who are very depressed or down on their luck, there's stuff in that struggle that is important to recognize. Even your own resiliency ADHDers, I think, are so good at dealing with adversity and bouncing back from it. We keep coming back over and over and don't give up a lot of times. That's that persistence and grit and determination, resiliency. Even if, like, yes, you've experienced a lot of hard things, you're still here. You're still working at it. You're still going. You're still moving through that stuff. Recognize that effort and how hard it's been to get to this place that you're in right now. And that right there is a strength in and of itself.
Yeah.
No, I think it's so key. And you said it really well, Aaron, that for so many people, there's this emphasis on the disorder piece, how hard it has been. And it can become this negative story about yourself, and even like a little bit of, blindness to all the strengths that you have, or a blindness to, places where you shine. Like, yes, you might not be able to do your taxes, but, and that's a real thing. Like, that's a serious thing if you're behind on that. But, you may really be great with kids, how you, engage with kids and have this spark and this playfulness at any age. I see that as a strength, or creativity, or, and we do have some research that suggests that creativity and divergent thinking may be enhanced by ADHD. And I think we need to have more of understanding of that, right? If you are a neurodiverse individual, where are the contexts where it's hard, and where are the contexts when you shine, it's an advantage. So I think that people are having these conversations, and we just, the science and the research needs to catch up a little bit more with that.
Yeah, you can see it in your relationships, right?
Yeah, like mindfulness, radical self-acceptance is not the just blind positivity or looking at just one aspect, one side of it. Radical acceptance is looking at the whole and accepting reality as it is, whether we want it to be or would like it to be. It is what it is. The reality is what it is. And we heard it
in both of Lydia's definitions, right? Like the thing that you'll note that I just released on ADHD Tonti, my little soapbox about why I say I am. And I'm very careful in the language that I choose, right? And I keep it very I statement focused, and because of the journey that Aaron and I have both been on, learning about how people radically accept their neurodivergent brain. And the way that Lydia broke it down, I think still both support radical acceptance, the narrative of, or the practice of. And there are some folks, I'll put it this way. Even if you are in a different definitional camp or a different use camp of how you disclose or present yourself and your brain wiring, both can be radically accepting, right? I'm a person with, I have, I am, can all still celebrate radical acceptance if that definition, if that self-definition or disclosure comes from a place of, this is what I have, some days are good, some days are bad, and I'm working on it in a powerful person in the middle of it all, right? Then we're nailing it. Then you're doing it, right? You're doing the work. We try as best we can at Attention Different to celebrate and encourage that practice as a baseline.
Yeah, and I think it's like aspirational, and I think it's maybe a place where you finally have some comfort zone with who you are, is to say, I am ADHD, right? Like I am ADHD with everything that ADHD means. Whether it means those aspects of, of the D disorder piece that we, what does that mean? And it's also that it's something that is just who I am and how I'm wired, and, how I can express who I am in the world and all that brilliance that comes with it. So it's like, if you say I'm ADHD, I'm everything that ADHD is. Everything that may come with it. And hopefully you also feel like there's always more right with you than wrong with you. I love that saying. This is from John Kabat-Zinn. There's always more right with you than wrong with you. That's something that we all should keep. So like, I love these mantras, like, it is what it is. And which you said a moment ago, it's a big one for radical acceptance. But and with that, there's always more right with you than wrong with you.
That's a great one. That's a really great place to end, honestly. I find it funny that you are not the first guest we've had on who deals in mindfulness or like anything that has to do with a great deal of patience where there have been technical difficulties. To me, that's some sort of God out there testing all of our patience, like some Shiva being like, no, today it's going to go wrong. So I'm actually delighted though that it's on days like this with guests like you, where we get a real use case example of how powerful this practice is and what beauty can come out of a temporary struggle, a temporary challenge. And as long as we commit to compassion, self-love, curiosity, we might end up with a podcast episode. So thank you so much, Dr. And I'm Lidia Zylowska, Dr. Zylowska, for being here on the Attention Different podcast. Before we go, what are your pluggables? Where can we find you? Are there books? Are there websites? Are there other platforms?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So if people are more interested about my work, they can go to my website. It's just my first and last name.com. So lidiazylowska.com. I do have a couple books that I have here. I can
bring them out.
Plug
bring them
in.
out.
Yep. So this is a book for patients, for anyone, for family members, even clinicians. This is a mindfulness prescription for adult ADHD that describes the maps for ADHD program in kind of 8 steps. And then this one is a newer book, so it's a little bit updated when it comes to research. And this is for clinicians, Mindfulness for Adult ADHD Clinicians Guide.
Oh, great.
So if you're a clinician or coach or, someone who wants to bring it into to maybe others, that's a good one to start. If you go to the website, I have an article that we wrote recently I wrote it with a colleague from South Korea, Dr. Seo, which is about mindful self-coaching. So there's that article feature that digs more deeply into what we're talking about, this inner voice and how to shift it.
That sounds fascinating. I want to check that out.
Yeah. There is a YouTube channel where there's some free mindfulness practices, Mindful RX ADHD, and all that is on the website, so you can poke around and see.
Fantastic. Yeah, so you can listen to a few guided things or practice some short exercises there.
Yeah, and if I may say, those recorded practices are slow-mo, so they're like fairly slow guidance. So if people feel like, I want to do this on a higher speed, that's actually could be a helpful point to start at times, and then you slow it down. This is a feedback I got from some people, like, this is too hard for me to do because it's slow.
And you can adjust the speed, and that's the magic of YouTube. Of adjust the listening
exactly.
speed.
In another interview, we will talk about the neuroplasticity or the neurowiring that's going on amongst our species due to the turning up of the speed on podcasts and YouTube videos and Twitch streams. And we're seeing a global trend towards faster talking, and I feel like we're going full circle back to like the 1930s, 40s radio talking. You know what I mean? Like hey, and then this time in Chicago, and people used to think that was funny. And I'm like, just you wait, because we're coming back.
and how kids are exposed to this, right? So they're training on a higher speed, and so slowing things down is like so important, I think, to give periods of time when you're not on that speed.
Yeah.
That would be a very interesting topic. I'm actually thinking like that would be a really great thing. I don't know if you have any research or any work that you're doing on that, but that's one of the key issues I see with parents coming to me with their kids just being on screens, being on devices all of the time, kind of raised with this in this digital age, right? And the short form content of scrolling and digesting, like very short form stuff. What does that do to the attentional span? How does that really change the brain as the brain is developing?
Yeah, I don't do research work in this area. I mean, I'm connected to it as a parent and having to battle these devices with my 11-year-old and with myself too. And I think we all can relate how often the phone may be pulling us.
Oh, yeah.
And I think mindfulness can be super helpful in breaking that pull and accepting also boredom, right? And being curious when you get bored. And practicing these moments of not doing anything, not having to be entertained, which is so hard in our culture, right? 'Cause and it's hard when you have ADHD brain.
Yes.
And now all these devices are filling this need that maybe could be redirected. And so anyway, I mean, I could talk about it as a parent and as a clinician. I just wanted to have that caveat.
Yeah. Well, I think we said enough for now. And I think the advice at the end, we'll just leave it like take some mindful digital breaks, give your brain a rest, go for a walk, get outside, do something else, get off the device. And for now, take a breath, and maybe we could end with a little bit of a breath for everyone. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. Slowly. Breathe. You got this.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Lidia. It's been a blast. The Attention Different podcast is hosted by me, Stephen Tonti.
And me, Aaron Smith.
The Attention Different podcast is produced by David Grabowski, who also wrote the theme music.
Edited by David Grabowski and Ian Lopez.
Visit us at attentiondifferent.com, where you can learn more about our team, discover resources, and much, much more.
We're on Instagram at attention_different.
And you can watch all our episodes like this one, plus tons more free content on youtube.com/@attentiondifferent.